Fueled by Death guest.
You are a double threat. You are not only a comic book writer, but you're a comic book artist. And for people who are in the comic book industry, one of my favorite questions is always, why did you get into this industry? Like, what? And I mean that in the most romantic sense of the word. Like, when you were younger, what drew you to comic books?
That's a really good question. I mean, the smart aleck answer is just because I'm an idiot. And I'm sure you get that answer a lot. And, I've been doing this almost 25 years now. So every year you feel like slightly more of an idiot. But no, it was, I grew up, sort of in the late 70s and early 80s, and comics were still, you were still going to the corner store, and it was just kind of a thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You went, you got a comic book and you bought a piece of candy, and, that was just kind of what you did for fun. But, mainly it was, I was a big Star Wars fan because I'm old enough to have actually seen Star Wars when it originally was in the theater and everything. Awesome. And then my mom saw one of the big Star Wars treasuries in one of the big Star Wars Marvel treasuries in the grocery store and bought it for me because she knew I liked Star Wars. So, it wasn't the first one, it was the second one. So it was the second half of the movie, if you know those Marvel treasuries. Yep. I took it home and just, it's like, how do you not instantly fall in love with it? And sort of as a corollary story is that Howard Chaykin drew that. And
right.
Many years later, we briefly shared a studio in LA. And I sort of, I've been working out of the studio there for a while, and eventually worked up the courage to say, Howard, you drew the first comic I ever read, Star Wars. And he just looks at me and totally deadpan goes, "Don't blame me."
That's great.
And walks off. But yeah, but that was it. I mean, there was just something about that sort of mixture of words. I was always a big reader as a kid. I was always sort of, drawing a lot when I was a kid. Something about that mixture of words and pictures just sort of sparked something in my head. And I've been a comic book fan pretty much, ever since. And slowly growing, my interest from, superheroes and the sort of stuff that was going on in comics when I was a kid, to then things like John Sable, Freelance, if you're that, which was a hugely influential books. And then but the big one for me was Keith Giffen and Paul Levitz's run on Legion of Superheroes. Mm-hmm. And that, I think once the Great Darkness saga came out, and I just happened to pick up an issue of it when I was a kid, I was basically like, oh my God, this is so cool.
That's awesome.
That's everything that I wanted out of a comic. So
what came first for you, professionally pursuing, I guess? Was it the writing aspect, or was it the artistic aspect?
The intention was always, in college, I was going to be a writer. Mm-hmm. I wanted to write comics, but I was going to a school in the middle of nowhere in Ohio, College of Worcester, which is a nice school, but you're surrounded literally by cows. Yeah, there's a little comic shop in town, which is a great little shop. But I wasn't really, there weren't a lot of other people into comics at the college. There's really only one other guy who really kind of drew, but he was really superhero oriented, and I kind of was interested in doing more like Moonshadow, and Sandman had just started, and Dave McKean and Grant Morrison's Arkham Asylum had come out, and that was just an explosion in my head. So I wanted to do these very sort of serious, pretentious kind of artsy comics. And, and I could kind of draw. I'd always drawn since I was a kid, copying Keith Giffen drawings from the Legion of Superheroes, mm-hmm. which one of these days he's going to find out about that and just beat me up. And so I just started drawing them myself. And when you're in comics or you're trying to break into comics, it's a lot easier to say, here's my picture of Batman. If I draw Batman, it will look like this, than it is to say, hey, I got a great idea for a Batman story. Can I tell it to you? Because one, they don't want to hear it. Right. It's a lot easier to sell yourself as an artist. And, I always feel a little strange about the fact that I consider myself a writer first, but I'm mostly known for being an artist, which is absolutely awesome, and I do not complain in any way, shape, or form. I've gotten to draw so much cool stuff. That I never in a million years would have imagined I'd get to draw, and just drew another thing that I can't talk about yet.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, teasing.
Where I was just kind of like, wait, you want me to do what? Okay. I mean, I'd be happy to do it.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it's weird because I've kind of gone through the last almost 25 years now with this weird sort of chip on my shoulder of like, I can write too. Let me write. So
speaking of really cool stuff, you've done some awesome things like X-Files and Doctor Who. Were you a big fan of those lines, those stories before you started drawing and writing for that?
On my shelf, you can see the 2 shelves of Doctor Who stuff. And I had a lot more of it before I moved into a much smaller apartment in another state. No, I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. I've been a Doctor Who fan since about 1977. We often talk about my generation of creative people being like, we're sort of the Star Wars generation. We all grew up with Star Wars. It's really influential on how we think. But I had sort of the added influence of Doctor Who the entire time. And Doctor Who is really my special jam. And it influences everything I do. All my creative interests are influenced. And X-Files, I like the X-Files a lot. And then I watched it pretty religiously when it was the first few seasons when it was on. And then I was working at Disney, and the lead artist on the game I was working on, because I worked at the Disney Interactive division, the lead artist was doing X-Files cards.
Oh.
And he asked me to come in and like do the underdrawing, and then he would kind of paint. So I spent a weekend with a stack of VHS tapes, and I had to watch every single episode of like 2 seasons in the course of just a few days, and like pick an image from each one to draw.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I didn't watch a lot of X-Files after that weekend.
I bet. Is it weird working on a project like that as opposed to something that's, and we're going to get into what you're working on now with the Beats of the Black Hand, where it's something that is completely, born from somebody's head, but you're working on, whether it's Doctor Who or it's X-Files, you're working on characters that, everybody knows what they look like. Everybody knows what they sound like. Everybody expects a specific thing from these characters. Is there a different approach to that as an artist or as a writer?
Honestly, as an artist, I was terrible at doing likenesses and doing sort of, drawing actors' faces. Mm-hmm. You'd think I'd be better at it, considering I've, drawn the Doctor since I was 6 years old. But yeah, I was never very good at it. And I had gotten, and frankly, I'd kind of always avoided licensed comics because there was sort of a stigma attached to them. Mm-hmm. A lot of people kind of see them as sort of bastard childs of the sort of, cool comics like Superman.
Right.
But I just really needed a job. I really needed a job, and my friend Ben Abernathy, who was then at Wildstorm, put me on Supernatural, and it was a learning process of like, okay, how do I draw real people, mm-hmm. and not just what's in my head? So it was an interesting process, and I sort of, over the course of like Doctor Who, I was starting to figure out. And then I think by the time X-Files came along, I finally felt like I had a style and a look and an approach to doing it. And I'm really, really pleased with it. Like I study, I'm a big film nerd too. So I study every episode. I study how they set up the shots, how they cut everything so that I can try to recreate that stuff visually in the comics, which is fun. I mean, I love doing that sort of stuff. But then sort of as a writer, I mostly, the stuff that I've written that isn't my own stuff, mm-hmm. Has been Doctor Who and some X-Files stuff. And it is interesting. You sort of pick apart sort of what makes the episodes of the show work. And then you try to it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You sort of figure out how to make what you want to do sort of fit within that mold. And, I make it sound like a math problem, and in a lot of ways it kind of is. But at the other hand, it's, when I was doing Doctor Who, I just sat down and thought, what would be a really awesome Doctor Who episode that I'd love to watch?
Oh, that's cool.
And then, write it. And then be told by your editor, actually, yeah, could you make it fit in 10 pages? And you go, yes, okay, I'll find a way to make it work.
That's funny.
But I'm one of those weird guys where I see, when you're working on Superman or you're working on X-Men or Batman, you're not doing your own thing. It's just like a licensed comic of another media property from TV or movie.
Yep.
You don't own it. You don't create it. We certainly put our own spins on those characters when we work on them, but at the same time, you're following in the footsteps and you're following the rules that were established by other people. You do not have control over that stuff.
That's true.
And doing X-Files or Doctor Who is exactly like that. Only, the potential audience for that material is a lot bigger. And yes, they will tell you if you get Mulder's chin wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. And I'm sure, with like the X-Files, you're dealing with the same two main characters predominantly, Mulder and Scully, and I loved your run on that. Thought it was really good. But with Doctor Who, I mean, for those of our listeners who might not be fans of that show, that character changes constantly. And I know you did a seminal run with the 10th Doctor, which is played on television by David Tennant. But did you get to do any other stories with any of the other Doctors?
Well, I did, oddly enough, a lot of Matt Smith stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you ever have to do, because again, for our listeners who might not know, the 11th Doctor's name in real life, the actor is Matt Smith. And
Matthew Wad Smith.
And the BBC thought that was hilarious.
I'm sure they did, in all their British humor.
I did a bunch of the Matt Smith stuff. IDW had sort of passed on the license by the time it became Capaldi, which is too bad because I think Capaldi was the first Doctor who was geared to what I draw. I was always being told, "Oh, you put too many lines on that face." Like, well, yeah, Capaldi, I could have gotten away with it.
You could have gotten away.
Not to insult Peter Capaldi.
No, he's just a little bit older. That's all.
He's a delightful human being, but he's got a look. And if you've ever seen my creator-owned comic, The October Girl, I mean, there's a character who basically looks like a young version of him.
Awesome.
Created long before he was the Doctor, but in a very similar look. So it's just a look I like. But yeah. It was fun, and there was I got to write a couple of Matt Smith stories.
That's cool.
Which was an awful lot of fun as well. But yeah, so I've drawn other Doctor stuff. I haven't gone back and done. I know Titan has done some sort of older Doctor material, and I haven't done that. I did get to draw my very last Doctor Who thing I drew for IDW. There was one panel where I got to draw every Doctor.
Awesome. I think I remember that panel.
That's
actually.
really cool.
And then there's this. I keep telling this story publicly. I really should not admit to this.
Go on.
There's a big double-page spread at the end of the issue. This is Prisoners of Time number 11, which was the Matt Smith Doctor issue. So of course they got me to draw it. Mm-hmm. There's a double-page spread where the instructions in the script were just draw any companion you want.
Oh.
But they're all in like these tubes because they've been captured by the bad guy, and so you had to do a wall that's all of as many as you wanted to do, as whichever ones you wanted to do, and fit them into those tubes. So I drew, I think it had to have been something like 40 or maybe less, maybe like 30 Doctor Who companions.
Wow.
In specific outfits from specific episodes. Entirely from memory.
Wow.
That's intense.
I'm a damn Doctor Who nerd.
No, that's awesome. And I'm sure all the other nerds were super stoked about the attention to detail. Again, for our listenership who might not be, in you too, Dustin, who might not be so...
call me out in front of Matthew Dow Smith.
Who's so into Doctor Who. Not only does the Doctor change, but his he always has a companion, sometimes two.
I know this.
But yeah, they change periodically too. So yeah, there must be 100 companions throughout the years.
I don't know the actual number, but it certainly feels like there have been at least 50, if not 100.
Has there ever been a real world meeting of the Matt Smiths? Have you ever?
I've never met the Matt Smith.
Got to make that happen
at some point. I think the universe might collapse if it happens.
It would be very fun collapse, though. I really want that. I want that photographic evidence to happen.
My
for sure.
my ongoing joke is I need to get Matt Smith, who drew Barbarian Lord and Lake of Fire, he's a fantastic artist. Get Matt Smith, who edited 2000 AD for years, and the actor Matt Smith together.
Yes.
We truly, it'll be like the Four Doctors special.
That'd be amazing. That would be amazing. I would pay to see that.
I do think the space-time continuum would collapse in and on itself.
One could only hope.
Why not?
So earlier you were saying that drawing likenesses might not be your strong suit, but I'm curious as to forcing yourself outside your comfort zone. Did that make you a better artist?
Sir, I would like to think so. I try to do my approach to any job I get has been to I always try to pick one thing about that job that I'm going to really, really try something new with and try to focus on something new. So I did a Mirror's Edge comic, if you know the game Mirror's Edge.
Yeah.
At Wildstorm with Rhianna Pratchett, who was one of the writers on the game, if not the writer on the game. So she wrote it and I drew it, and I'm not very good at drawing buildings or doing perspective. So I went into that and said, I'm going to just use this to learn as much perspective as possible. And I literally pulled my How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way off the shelf.
Awesome.
And it's got a great description of how to do perspectives and stuff. And that's what I did. So there's something like that for every project. Because, if you don't do something like that and you've been doing this long, you'd go bonkers.
Yeah.
Plus, it's really healthy to humble yourself a little bit and kind of go back to the basics.
Well, keep in mind, I think of myself as a writer first. So I tend to think I'm okay. I'm an okay artist for a writer. So I do not have a completely overblown confidence in my own art. I think I can draw. But, when you're friends with, I was having dinner with Ron Marz and, I'm sitting next to Rick Leonardi and, we hang out with Jim Starlin and, you hang out with just these amazing artists and you're like, yeah, I'm just like a 4-year-old with a crayon compared to these guys. So I try to approach it as a craft, not as an art, and let other people judge, the artistic merit of something that I'm doing. I just want to, learn how to draw better and have fun and,
I think that's really good to have that with any kind of, career, is to always want to be looking to learn that next thing, you never think you're the upper echelon.
Well, I imagine Jim Starlin himself thinks the same way. If he thought he was the end all be all in the shit, he probably wouldn't be as good as he really is.
That's true. You're always bettering yourself. And speaking of, projects that you get to work on, one thing that we're really excited here, super excited is Beast of the Black Hand. And we got to talk with Paul Harding, who is a friend of all of ours, obviously, and also where this story was born inside that brain, basically. And we know that Ron Marz is writing it. And you're the artist. And
I'm the artist. Yeah.
I kind of want to talk a little bit about how did you get involved with this project and what has it been like working on this project?
Well, I've known Ron and Paul for years, as you guys know. Mm-hmm. I've known Ron for 15 years and I've known Paul for probably about 10. And it really is like three brothers working on a project, only with less fighting.
That's awesome.
It's really cool. Well, I was in Seattle for Emerald City, and Ron and I were sharing a room. And one night he just kind of goes, X-Files was coming to an end, and I was like, I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. And Ron just goes, hey, I have an idea. There's this thing Paul and I have been talking about. Would you have any interest in working on something like that? And he kind of gave me a very quick rundown. And my first question was like, I don't have to draw horses, do I? Because I hate drawing horses. They're very hard.
Yeah, they are.
No, but he kind of hit the high points and was like, it's going to be a period piece, and it's going to be a lot of people in suits, and it's going to be sort of some steampunky, diesel punky kind of technology, and there are going to be big monsters. And I'm basically like, yeah, okay, cool, I'm in.
Win. Yeah.
I mean, I love, Ron and I work so well together, and I love Paul to death. He's just the nicest guy, and just a really talented guy in his own right. So, how do you say no? It's like, hey, two of your best friends want to do a thing.
Right.
How are you going to say no?
And the story sounds so much fun, and it's great because, like, as someone like me who's just a fan of the genre, it's great that you guys not only are friends, but that you run in that same circle, that it could just all kind of fit like this, because a story like this created by Paul, I think I can't picture anybody else than you drawing this. I really can't. Thanks. And especially from a lot of the art that we've seen. And congratulations on the Kickstarter. You guys did a very successful Kickstarter that both D-Man and myself backed, so we're very excited to get.
Yeah, I was going to say it was quite some help from you guys. So thank you very much.
We're really excited about that, and you guys are hitting the ground running. The first volume of the graphic novel is coming out this year. Yep. And because you guys raised so much, we're actually getting a sneak peek of the second volume from you.
Indeed you are. And there are no horses in that one yet.
Yes.
We'll see if that's true. Yeah, no, I finished the black and white art right before Christmas and started in on the preview pages, which are, really exciting. Like, how often do you get to do that?
Right.
You get a little jump start on the next book. And it's going to be crazy.
That is so exciting. And
the first 8 pages are pretty crazy in and of themselves. So
the thing about something like this, like you were saying, is it gets to be fun because it's like 3 brothers kind of just being able to work on a project together.
Yeah.
But in a normal setting, because you are a double threat, because you have a writing background and an artistic background, when you work as an artist with a writer, or conversely, as a writer with an artist, do you find it that it's easier for you because you kind of speak both languages?
It can be. I mean, really, it depends on the writer. Ron and I have a really great shorthand, and there are certain things he just sort of leaves to me. Mm-hmm. And, he isn't afraid to just say, hey, if you can come up with a better solution for how this works, go for it. I don't care. And that certainly helps. And I've written with some writers who are very, very like, nope, just do what I say. I don't want to hear what your opinion is.
Woof.
Which is okay. I mean, I've worked with Alan Moore and James Robinson, who I think are two of the best writers to have sort of taken on comics, and they both have very specific visions of what they want on a page and how they want that action to play out.
Yeah.
And as an artist, you just go, okay.
Yeah.
You do what they tell you.
What did you work on with each of those guys?
Well, my very first project at DC was Starman number 11, which is insane because that was my favorite comic at the time, and I still think it's one of the best superhero comics ever made. I think you could re-release it now, and it would still work. So that was my first one, and Alan and I did a couple of issues of Supreme together at Rob Liefeld's awesome studios or press or whatever it was called.
Whatever it was called at the time. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun, and you get to say, I worked with Alan Moore.
Right.
Yeah, that must have been it. What was that like working with Alan Moore?
I was great. Someone sent me a script and I drew it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then somebody sent me a check.
Nice. That's always the best part. That's always the best.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, there is a part when you're a writer and an artist, there's a part of you that has a tendency to say, I could have totally done that better. Or I would have done this instead of that. Or, you sort of insert your own sensibilities as a writer. And, for the most part, the writers that I've worked with, I've never really done that. I mean, Alan and Ron and James, and I did the Batman 66 Steed and Peele crossover with Ian Edginton, who is another CrossGen guy from when Ron and I were there at CrossGen. And those guys, I remember because thinking I had an idea I wanted to pitch for that crossover, and they called me up and said, "Hey, can you draw it?" And I'm like, "Well, sure." And then I got Ian's script. It was like, "No, this isn't what I would have done at all. It's better."
Nice.
That's nice.
Yeah, which is really nice. But Ian, I don't understand Ian. Ian should be a freaking giant in this industry in that he always turns in solid stories. They're really thoughtful. They're really clever. And he just never caught on.
Yeah.
Which isn't to say that he hasn't done amazing stuff and doesn't have a great career, but it's kind of like, dude, like, why isn't your name on everybody's lips? Because I'm reading this script and I'm like, this is like, what an insane concept. Batman 66 and Steed and Peele.
Yeah.
And to get to draw some stuff that's as crazy and as fun. It's like, there's like bees that are robots attacking people, and it sounds stupid, but it totally works.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so it's weird because I would love to write more. Whenever I get an opportunity to write, I just wrote a Swamp Thing story for DC Digital, and I love being able to do it. And yet at the same time, I love being able to go and draw a script for a friend of mine or another talented writer and just get to do that. It's weird though. It's like there's always the danger that you start thinking, oh, I could have done this so much better. But it's not usually true.
So, the comic book industry, we've gotten to talk to some people in the industry now on this show a couple times. And one thing that is interesting is how much this industry has changed over the years. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit on what it was like when you broke into comics as to kind of how you see the industry today. Do you think it's changed for the better or for the worse?
Well, I mean, back in comics, when I started in comics, during the Civil War, it's changed a lot. And part of that, really the driving force, unsurprisingly, has been technology in different forms. I mean, when I started in comics, we were drawing on boards and we were sending them to the publisher in big FedEx boxes, and there was a spider's web of FedEx boxes traveling all over the country and the world as you get these books together. And then it became, you had to scan it and send it in, and then coloring was being done on the computer instead of, with markers and things. And so it's that the artistic process has changed a lot just with the introduction of digital tools, but also, man, digital comics, that's changing a lot of stuff. The question I get all the time, other than, would you ever do more Doctor Who stuff, which I get asked all the time.
I'm sure.
Is like, how do I break into comics? And it's like, don't ask me. I'm not going to tell you. But the truth is, make a comic and you can publish it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you can finish a comic, you can put it out there and people can read it. Whether they will read it, whether you can make money off them reading it, is a whole other story, which is interesting and worrying.
Yeah.
So that's changed a lot, but also just like within this last year, I mean, I think we're really struggling as an industry to figure out how to sell stuff.
Yeah.
Not that people don't want it, not that, I'm not a gloom and doomer. I'm not saying that the industry is going to go away. It'll never really go away, but we're seeing, stores having a hard time with the amount of stuff that's out there and getting it all on the shelves and getting the kinds of sales they need to keep comics going. I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot, obviously, because I'm a nerd and I think about this stuff while I'm drawing for 16 hours in a day.
Yeah.
But yeah, and right now is a very interesting time because I think, we're wrestling with the fact that our audience is a lot more diverse than we were playing to before.
Yeah.
Comics basically have always been for me.
Yeah.
Ever since I was a little kid, they've always been targeted to me. As I got older, the comic books got more mature. I am their ideal reader. I'm, the person who has the extra money to spend on comics. But, to be honest, I like the more diverse stuff. That's like, I don't know who the audience for this is. It's just really good and it's really weird. And I love that we're starting to see that stuff now, but it's also very hard on the industry because you have a lot of material and you have a really limited amount of shelf space in direct market comic book shops.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I remember being a kid, collecting comics in the 80s, and I mean, the only conversation was, are you going to buy Marvel or are you going to buy DC? I remember when Image became Image, and these rogue artists and writers broke away and started their own company, and
it was awesome.
And it was awesome, and literally it turned this industry kind of a little bit of a corner, and people were like, oh, well, I can maybe read something that's not a Superman or an X-Man, kind of comic. But like you said, now you walk into a comic shop and you can find a comic not only about anything, but pretty much published by anyone or anybody, which isn't a terrible thing. But I personally watch a lot of the industry talk too, and it does seem scary from time to time.
Well, you got to think with the growth of technology, and like you were saying, Matt, with everything being easier to make without having to go through all these steps to create a masterpiece. The same goes for the music industry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where now it's actually starting to, I don't want to say watered down, but maybe that's the best word for it, where it's hard to make a sound in a room full of noise,
Yeah, exactly. Well, we always talk about, particularly because I write prose too, because, it needs free time. And don't even get to talking about the music side, because I do music too. But when Amazon first started the Kindle and you started to see sort of the explosion of the ebooks thing, I'm sure you guys know this, but for the audience, they were talking about who are they going to be the gatekeepers. There's so much stuff out there. Like you can just publish something on Amazon with the click of a button, and I've done it myself with certain things that I've written. I'm just like, I'll just put it up on there and kind of see if anyone wants to read it. And there was a sense that, there was this dilution of attention because there's just so damn much stuff.
There is.
Like, how do you know what to read? How do you know what's good? And you have to rely on word of mouth and these weird algorithms. Like, every once in a while, there's one thing I put up there that every once in a while I'll just get a random couple sales from. And it's like, who found that?
Right.
How did you, I don't publicize that. I don't push that stuff out. It's just kind of on there. And if you're searching my name, you come across it. So it's like, it's very strange that people find it. And I know the music industry, because I've been talking to some music industry people about that too. It's great. You can, on my Mac, I've got my instruments behind me. I can sit down and record a fairly professional sounding track on my freaking, laptop.
Yeah.
Which is awesome, but
and you can put it on iTunes.
And it's
and
awesome.
you can put it on iTunes.
Yeah.
Which is a great thing to be able to do, but it's a double-sided coin where every jerk is making tracks for everybody else to listen to, and now we're stuck in a perpetual Netflix hole.
Yeah.
That media is just this whole thing that we're just scrolling through, and we don't even know what to watch because it's just overloaded with choices.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah, that whole thing where I just did that the other day, where I just was staring at Netflix, and I just, there's so much stuff. I just closed it. I couldn't decide on anything.
And that's how.
And honestly, comics is going to become that.
Yeah.
And we got to come to terms with that.
And that's how I feel with Spotify too. You open up Spotify and you're like, man, I have everything at my fingertips. Yeah. I don't know what to listen to.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Well, and I think I find myself going back, whether it's film or TV or music or comics, I just go back. I find myself going back to the stuff that I read before everything was digital.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I go back to the stuff that I loved when I was younger, just because I know I'm going to like it.
Yeah.
And, it's just sort of weird. And I feel bad because how often do I discover new music? Me personally, very rarely.
Yeah.
Do I discover new artists? I mean, my wife got me into mountain goats, and just like I'd never heard of mountain goats. I would just never been exposed to mountain goats.
Yeah, I like that band.
It's a great band.
The animal or the band?
The band. I like
that. I'm sure mountain goats are very nice. Yeah, no, I like the band too. I've seen them a couple times here in DC, but it's like I'm going back and I'm listening to XTC because it's like, oh, I have access to like every single thing XTC ever put on tape ever.
And
push of a button. So And really, between XTC and Elvis Costello and Crowded House, yeah. I'm a nerd, and I'm very, very white, and I grew up in a very
it's good
grew up in a
music.
very particular period of time. But yet, at the same time, like Foo Fighters, I was exposed to Foo Fighters and love Foo Fighters because I was playing in a band with Joe Casey, and
Really?
Joe Casey, the legendary writer now, which is not so legendary back then. I was his bass player in a band called the Sellouts.
Can I look you guys up anywhere?
It's happening.
I don't know there is a band called the Sellouts. I don't think it's us. There's a band you can find. Joe Casey, I know, has talked about it in old interviews.
We'll find it.
We'll find it.
Oh, God. But yeah, but you would go, I was exposed to new music because, Joe had a van and we would drive in the van to the rehearsal space and he just put something in.
Oh, yeah.
But now we're also isolated. I'm sitting at home. The only music I really listen to is the stuff that I seek out myself.
Yeah.
But it is awesome because if I hear about something or someone tells me about something, I push a few buttons and listen to it. So
that's very true.
It's kind of cool. But do those artists make money?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean that translates to the comic industry again. It's like so many people putting out so much stuff. It's like who's actually making money in the industry.
And that's the benefit of the Kickstarter stuff.
For sure.
We had talked about that before we started recording. Is that I always feel a little bit strange about Kickstarter because you're going out basically you're going out directly to your fans and your fan base and saying, please give me money so we can do this thing.
Right.
And creative people are suddenly having to become marketers and sort of managers.
Yeah.
And we're idiots. We should not be in charge of anything. Put us in a corner and let us kind of go wild. But it's an interesting kind of way of doing this, and it has its upsides and its downsides. Obviously, the upside is that we got Beast of the Black Hand finance, and we get to keep doing more of it.
And that's coming out on Ominous Press, but that doesn't mean that that's just a small press that you can only get from the Kickstarter. For our listeners out there, they can go to their local comic book shop and ask for this graphic novel when it comes out. I'm not sure what the print plan is. Ron and Sean Husfar, who's sort of the head of Ominous.
He knows the plan. I'm just waiting on more script pages from Ron.
Well, I know as a comic collector and as an avid frequent customer of a local comic shop, that is exactly how stuff gets done. If all of our listeners will go out to their own local comic shops and request this book, then it'll be everywhere. That's how it's the same thing with music. If you call your local radio station and request that one song, then it starts to get played everywhere. And
and that's never changed.
That's never changed. Yep. One thing that we always come to at this show, and it's an interesting question, I think, for you because, you even touched upon this. You were right before you started with Beast of the Black Hand. You were finishing up your run on X-Files. Didn't really know where you were going to go for your next job. But you, like you said, you're a writer. You're an artist. You even dabble in prose and music. What fuels you to keep going out there and finding these projects that you want to be passionate about working on?
Well, I mean, the obvious answer is coffee. Lots of coffee.
Boo.
Boo. Yeah, we all hate coffee. It's just what I do. It's how I'm wired.
Yeah.
This is great. I went to a writing workshop with David Morrell, and if you don't know who David Morrell is, he's the guy who created Rambo. He wrote the novel First Blood, but he also teaches writing. So he gives this sort of talk, and he says, why, congratulations on being here, making it into this program. Here's the question: why do you write? And so it's a whole room of writers, and so we all have the same answer, which is because we have to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And David, because David is a good writer and a very smart man, goes, okay, of course, but why do you have to write? If you can answer the question, why do you have to write, or why do you have to make music? Why do you have to draw? Then you have a much better idea of what it is you should be doing and what it is that you're going to do. So I look at every project as an opportunity to do something interesting, do something new. I agree to the projects that excite me, and working on the projects is sort of a long, slow process of figuring out what it is about it that excites me, and then adding that to my list of things that I want to do more of. Awesome. I know that's a weird answer, but
no, I think that's
a good answer.
Great outlook. I mean, that translates to anything. Like you should. Those are questions you should ask yourself in all aspects of life. I think that's very poignant.
And my answer is that the world doesn't work the way that I want it to. So I write stories that deal with that, and awesome. I tend to draw stories that deal with a world that works in a different way. And Beast of the Black Hand, not to keep sort of
no, talk about it all day long.
But it's that's another one of those projects. It's a fun little sidestep. It's what if things were just slightly different.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of fun. And obviously we get to play with history. And Paul, Ron, and I are just all massive history nerds. I'm more of a UK nerd. I know I read way too many books about Scottish history, which are just all about just death. Every page, everybody died. They know their U.S. history even better than me. But every sort of project is an opportunity to just kind of have fun and play around with some interesting ideas, and hopefully, the audience will respond to that. And if we're lucky, they do, and we get to do more stuff like this.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, I mean, you've got Beast of the Black Hand, which is coming out this year with that first volume of the graphic novel.
Yep.
You mentioned that you just finished up working on a Swamp Thing for DC Digital, which is exciting.
Yep. It's issue 4 of Batman and Harley Quinn that ties into the Batman Harley Quinn movie, but I think that's because they also did Harley Quinn and Batman, so I can't remember which
right.
series.
Yep.
That's one of them, and I think it's issue number 4.
That's awesome. Is there anything else that is coming out that you can talk about? Because I know in the industry there's lots of things that you're working on that are secret at this moment. But
there are several things I'm on my plate right now that are secret. But I've been off and on for the last few years, or it's more than just a few years. Off and on for like the last 5 or 6 years. I've been doing a book called The October Girl, which is a digital only book put out through Monkey Brain Comics and Comixology.
Awesome.
There are 4 issues out because it's not like I make a lot of money doing it.
Right.
So, but I do that. I've got 4 more issues of that are actually in the can and coming out this year, which I'm excited about. And there are some other secret things involved with that project that I'm not allowed to talk about. And
awesome.
I'm trying to think I do so much. Like I just basically am just constantly racing from project to project. It's a rough life,
No, it's good to be busy though. Do you think, and not to push the timeline too much, but the success of the Kickstarter with Beast of the Black Hand, Volume 1 coming out, you're giving a preview of Volume 2. Do you think we'll see Volume 2 in this year?
I mean, will I get in trouble for saying any of this? I think that if the cards are right, we will.
That's excellent. That's exciting.
I think we will. I'm very excited. They've told me what the story was, and it's just insane.
Awesome. That makes me
crazy.
very excited.
Yeah. Do you think you'll launch another Kickstarter for that as well?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, these sort of smaller outings like this, you almost have to now at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, just to have the financing to keep the production costs up where you will. I mean, obviously in a perfect world, we wouldn't have to do that. That we could just on the back of the sales of book 1, and we'd all be living in our mansions, driving our Porsches around, even though I would not have a Porsche. I would have a Morgan.
Nerd.
Or I'd have a Lotus Super 7 like number 6 from The Prisoner.
There you go.
Sorry.
Nerd.
I'm just a nerd. I mean, it'd be great if we could, if the sales on book 1 paid for the, for us to put together book 2. But honestly, it's not how it works anymore.
Right.
Especially the kind of quality that we're going for with, hardcovers and really nice paper and things like that. So we'll probably have to do something like that when we do it, when that is announced. I don't know. I'm just the artist on this one. Which is great.
That's great.
Well, I got to say, as a fan of the project, and if you were to do another Kickstarter, I would be happy for it.
Oh, thank you.
I
Ditto.
love being a part of these cool ideas at the base level. I feel like, me as a fan, now I get to help create a thing that I'm such a fan of.
Yeah.
Which is like the coolest thing about Kickstarter. So, if you do another Kickstarter, let us know. We'll
Deathwish Coffee will be there. We'll also be there.
We'll be your hype man.
Yeah,
We'll bump it up.
for sure.
Awesome.
Awesome.
No, I really appreciate that. I appreciate the support. Really, these things are tricky to do, and especially when you're doing something different like Beasts of the Black Hand, because there's no superheroes, there are no capes.
Yeah.
There's some really nerdy history stuff in it.
I love that shit though.
So it's awesome that people are excited about and are supporting it. So thank you.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today, Matt. It was absolute pleasure to talk to you. And I know we will be talking again, especially on the heels of even more Beats of the Black Hand. We've now had you, Paul, and Ron.
Fantastic.
And all we got to do is talk to Sean, and we have the whole trifecta, or the quadruple.
You have the whole, quadrology?
Quadrology? I don't know. You're the writer.
That involves math.
Yeah.
I'm a creative person. I don't do the math stuff.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and same to you guys. I appreciate the support.
Awesome.
Yeah. Cheers, man.
Cheers.
Cheers.
This has been Fueled by Deathcast, a Death Wish Coffee Company podcast production. Thanks for listening.